from early development on, every single B cell has to have an antibody molecule on the surface. It knows that it has an antibody molecule on the surface because there is a constant signal from the antibody. The B cell, however, as it develops, has different extent of vulnerability. When it's in the bone marrow, it's very vulnerable. It needs reassurance. It needs to be told that it has a functional B cell receptor. It leaves the periphery, it's not nearly as vulnerable to the signal. Nevertheless, the moment it starts to proliferate like this, it starts to mutate its receptor, the default program is to die. The only way these cells will survive is if they get a positive signal by the antigen receptor. So these cells are going to mutate, going to get nice enhancement of its affinity for antigen. The other thing that we're going to do is switch their constant region, potentially. At least we'll have the option to do so. So if we undergo class switching, this is to the constant region of a molecule. So why would a B cell do that? Well, the T cell, as I told you, provides a signal through CD40 ligand and CD40 interaction. It also secretes cytokines. These cytokines are going to now initiate transcription through these switch regions. When you do that, you give a B cell an opportunity to switch its constant region. The different constant regions are specialized for various things. The IgM is what the B cell starts with. A very nice molecule. It's a heavy chain that's going to basically carry B cells through development. It's also has some advantages in that IgM can be pentameric when secreted. So actually, before I go further, why do we actually care about the constant regions? It's because after a few days, after acquiring a bunch of mutations and potentially going through class switch recombination, these B cells can now start to exit the germinal center, the ones that got positively selected. The vast majority of them undergo cell death. An occasional one that got positively selected because it had a great receptor can become either a plasma cell or memory cell. Or it can go back in and try again and get even better.
Where does the T cell go after it's doing the cytokine and the activation? Where does it go when the T cell goes to the germinal?
The T cell, if it's activated as well, is going to be secreting cytokines. So it also can proliferate. It also can actually enter the periphery and kind of sit on the outskirts of this proliferative center, of this germinal center. But this is a helper T cell, it's not a cytotoxic T cell, so it doesn't per se go and kill antigen unlike, let's say, CD8 T cell, kill bacteria unlike a CD8 T cell. Its main function is to provide help. So they will proliferate to some extent simply because you'll have more and more B cells. But it's not going to do it to the same extent as B cells. So plasma cells are going to are basically no longer realistically B cells. In fact, the transcription program, if you actually look at it, is not going to be very similar to a B cell. It's not going to be, it's going to be more similar to a B cell than to a T cell, but it realistically becomes a huge endoplasmic reticulum bearing cell that's going to secrete tons and tons of antibody. The antibody that it's secreting is the same molecule that is on the cell surface of this B cell. It just basically is a metamorphosis. It becomes antibody secreting cell. The memory cell is what gives you immune memory. This is the reason why when you're challenged after a vaccine, you make a response much faster. When you get the same infection twice, you hardly notice it. It's because these memory cells, unlike the initial cells, have much higher affinity for antigen. You started with a cell that was 1,000-fold or more worse at fighting the bacteria missed memory cell. So the next time you get infected with the same bacteria, you have several logs of advantage at recognizing it. And these memory cells also have different requirements for activation. They get activated much faster. And you have greater number of them, most likely, than the original precursor cell. So, needless to say, this is pretty damn important. The plasma cell is going to, as I said, secrete antibody. Now, the first plasma cells that are going to come out are going to be having the same constant region as what you started with, which is IgM. IgM has some advantages. It's pentameric, meaning when it's secreted, you actually have 5 of these antibody molecules that near their constant region get connected together, and if they recognize some antigen, they're going to really surround it like crazy. And what can they do? They can actually, besides everything else, now initiate a complement cascade. You guys already have some lecture on complement or not? Okay, good. So this is the cascade that's going to get activated. So obviously it has some advantages. Depending on the cytokines that the T cell produces, so you have a half dozen or so of these constant regions. Depending on the cytokine that the T cell produces, different constant regions are going to get transcribed heavily. So it's these cytokines that are going to determine which class you're going to now switch to. The switching happens because these constant regions, the switch regions upstream of them, are very rich in GC nucleotides. And you have enzymes that are going to recognize the switch regions and initiate the double-strand break at each of them and now bring them together. I mean, this is going to be somewhat similar an acid or VGJ recombination in that it's really on the level of DNA. It's not on the level of splicing. It is a permanent change in the B cell. If this is your DNA and you have 2 switch regions, what's going to happen is you're going to have them brought together and you're going to cut out whatever is in between. So from then on, this B cell is not going to have this intervening DNA anymore. Same thing as what happened with VGJ, except here it's actually across a much longer genetic, much longer space, genetic space essentially. Now, what can you switch to? You have a bunch of IgG, different IgG classes. I'm not going to go into what is the difference between them, meaning IgG1, IgG2A, and so on. You have IgA, and you have IgE. So, IgG is actually the predominant class of antibody that is in your bloodstream. So, it is good at opsonization and at binding covalent. It is highly soluble and has a long half-life. All of these are obviously good advantages to have in the context of an immune response. IgA is a molecule that is very good at binding mucosal surfaces and actually going between layers of mucosa. So this is what is going to be associated with mucosal surfaces and also gut. Also what is most going to be very present at high levels in maternal milk. IgE is actually probably the least predominant of all, not probably, it is by far the least predominant class of antibody molecules that you have. I think comprises less than 0.1% of all the antibody in your bloodstream. So one reason for that is the FC portion, meaning the basically butt end of the antibody molecule. So this part of it is called the FC. The FC portion of the antibody molecule is very good at binding Fc receptors that are present on specialized cells, including mast cells. So actually, Ig is hardly present in the blood. It's mostly already bound to the mast cells. And what happens is if you have binding of antigen that is floating around to the variable portion of this antibody molecule, you're going to activate mast cells. If you activate mast cells, you get release of histamine and other soluble mediators, which can be a bad thing in the context of asthma, any other autoimmune or hypersensitivity response. The reason we evolved to have it is actually more in the context of immunity against worms and other, in some ways, prehistoric pathogens. Okay, so basically you have switching to any one of these that occurs during the same time, more or less, as the immune response. Now the problem with all of this is that this process is unique to B cells, which is good. You have only one cell type that goes through and makes double-strand breaks. However, both the VTG recombination and especially somatic hypermutation is dangerous in the context of lymphoma. You're talking about introducing double-strand breaks in cells that are already rapidly proliferating. Now, if you happen to introduce a double-strand break and get a nonsense mutation here or get a useless mutation, these B cells, as I told you, are programmed, their default program in this context is to undergo cell death. The only way they're going to survive is if they get positive signal when they bind antigen on a follicular dendritic cell. However, if they introduce a double-strand break and now go through class switching, and instead of switching to a different region and going through switching of the antibody classes, rearrange now to a MYC gene or to BCL-XL or to BCL6 or some other pro-survival molecule that is going to give them a selective advantage, they might stop caring whether or not they have a functional antibody on the surface because they have already pro-survival signal from one of these alleles. If they have a pro-survival signal and they no longer care whether or not they have a functional in the global molecule on the cell surface, it is very likely that they're going to keep proliferating. This is why 90% of lymphomas and leukemias are of B-cell origin. Furthermore, out of the 90% or so of lymphomas and leukemias that are of B-cell origin, not to mention you also have multiple myeloma, which is essentially also B-cell tumors, and the tumor of the plasma cells. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just wondering what determines whether you become a plasma cell to begin with, as opposed to a memory cell.
What was the question?
What determines if a cell becomes a plasma cell or a memory cell? So it's actually a very good question, and I do not have a good answer for you. It's actually something that is still poorly understood. It's a transcriptional program that is basically one commitment to one lineage or the other inhibits the program for the opposite lineage. Basically, if you start to become a plasma cell, you have to differentiate so much to become basically an antibody factory that you shut off all other options, including becoming a memory cell. In the opposite fashion, if you determine to become a memory cell, and therefore most of the time you need to initiate a program that would allow long-term survival, ensure long-term survival, you again shut off any possibility of becoming a plasma cell. I can give you the few molecular players that are important in this, but the bottom line is we actually still don't understand, and it's still an area of investigation. So, to get back to the issue of lymphomagenesis in the context of B cells. So, 90% of tumors are of lymphomas and leukemias are of B-cell origin. Furthermore, out of those 90%, vast majority of them, if you went and sequenced the Ig genes, you're going to actually find that they're either somatically hypermutated, that there is evidence of class switch recombination, or both. Meaning most of lymphomas and leukemias that we know of, whether it's Burkitt's, Hodgkin's, or diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, are going to have evidence of having gone through this process. So, despite us having spent a good part of the last 2 days, or last 2 lectures on VGJ recombination and class switch recombination, this is the bottom line. As much as it's a great process in terms of adding diversity, it is extremely dangerous in terms of lymphomagenesis.
Can you re-explain where this process in the body is going over again?
In terms of physical location,
Physical location.
so it's in almost every secondary immune organ. The biggest one probably is spleen, but you have it in tonsils, you have it in a lot of other immune organs.